Josh, nice to meet you, buddy.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. I was excited. I got a copy of your book. I thumbed through it. I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I really had me, uh, got me excited to talk to you. I don't get to talk to many actors. I'm eminently curious about how you do what you do and how you handle all the bullshit up in Hollywood and all that. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But also, you just seem like a really cool guy. You got a great
Well,
sense of humor. You seem like you got a good head on your shoulders, but obviously you've gone through a lot of shit to get there. So it's going to be a fun conversation. So thanks for doing this.
I really appreciate it, and it's funny. I'm not sure if you saw or not, but I have a story about me working with some Navy SEALs in the book.
Yeah.
So I'm
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 anxious to talk about that. I wonder if I know them. I probably do.
yeah.
So I like to just, forget about, set aside the impression that you think people have of you now as a childhood actor, now an adult actor, author, millions of followers, all of that aside. Who gives a shit? How did you formulate your early impressions of who Josh Peck was? Like, where did you grow up? What were your parents like? What were some of the kind of early traumas? What was the young Josh like that started to shape who you are today?
Well, I think it's a great question. I mean, I never knew my dad growing up, so I think that
That's
immediately is sort of an interesting inheritance and
definitely.
informs. It's funny, I've talked about this book a lot, and I was on my friend Giannis Pappas, who's a great comedian. I was on his pod, and I sort of gave this stock answer about myself because I'd been asked it a lot of like I thought that I was born without the same manual that everyone else gets when
Hmm.
they arrive on this earth. A manual for living, how to navigate the world, abiding by the social contract that it seemed to have been missed on me, that I never received sort of this guide for life or this blueprint for living.
Because you didn't have a father, or do you just think you were special?
Well, it was funny because then Giannis said, "Oh, you mean a dad?"
Hmm.
He's like, "A
Right.
dad would have done that." And I
Right.
was like, "Ah, gotcha." And I had an incredible mom who did more than 50% of the work. She did more than one parent could, and yet I think there were still certainly some glaring sort of blind spots there. So I think in looking back at myself as a young person, I was sort of a guy working from some limited means, but doing the best that he could.
Did anyone ever fill that gap for you, the dad gap?
I was lucky, to my mom's credit again, knowing that she could, do as much as she could as an incredible sort of tigress single mom, but that
Hmm.
no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't give me all of it. She got me a big brother from the Big Brothers
Oh,
Foundation when I
cool.
was
What a
8.
great organization. Yeah.
Really special. And I mean, giving money is important, but I think if you can give your time, that just says so much. And um, my big brother and I, Dan, we have a very special relationship. I think statistically in Big Brother, Big Sister, the relationships last anywhere from 3 to 10 years.
Hmm.
Usually
Hmm.
through a kid's adolescence, but we've stayed close now for almost 30 years. He was the
Wow.
best man at my wedding, so I was so lucky. I've been so lucky to have him, and honestly, my father-in-law has sort of um, served as a great male figure in my life.
Okay. Well, how old were you when you got married? I'm curious because you're still a young guy,
I
at least compared to
was,
me.
well, you look great, but
Thank you very much.
I was 31, I guess. Yeah, 30, about 2017. Yeah,
Got it.
31.
Yeah, I got married at 31. That's a perfect age, if I don't say so myself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, your mom, was she involved? No, let's just get cut to the chase. Was she involved somehow in the industry? Air quotes, or was it somehow? How did you stumble upon being a childhood actor?
Yeah, not at all. She wasn't in the industry in any way other than she was kind of an unrealized performer herself and great singing voice, hilarious, would take over any party or any room and start telling jokes, like old. She was like a Joan Rivers
Yeah. Oh,
type.
cool.
And I think that probably when she saw her kid had a bit of an affinity for performing, which was why she kind of was the jet fuel behind me and certainly supported me because she didn't get that support herself. But no, it started for me doing, stand up comedy when I was 8 or 9 years old because I found an ad for an agent in the back of an acting magazine in New York. And I wound up meeting him and he said, "Well, I rep comedians of all ages." And I said, "Perfect. I'm all ages." And he said, "I can get you 5 minutes at a comedy club if you put an act together." So I kind of Frankenstein together some jokes I'd heard my mom tell, impressions, making fun of school observations. And I put 5 minutes together. And that's what, was my first entrance in the showbiz.
That's cool. Now, so I'm curious again, my a little bit about my background probably because you researched me, but I'm really into, just the psychology of the mind, mental development, mental toughness and all that. What was it that caused you to think that you were funny? Was it a need? Was it a sense of kind of a neediness to be like seen or heard because of this maybe lack of a father figure, or what was it in you that was propelling you forward to this, or do you think it was a karmic thing? You just kind of came in as a comedian.
Well, I was fat. And so that sort of informed a lot of my decisions growing up because I felt like there was no body positivity then, you
Interesting.
know,
Yeah. Right
in the
on. Right.
90s.
Right.
It was like, oh, if you're fat, I think most people made a knee jerk reaction, even if they loved you, that you were slovenly, lacked willpower. Um, and I hated walking into situations feeling as though I was at a disadvantage.
Hmm.
And so I didn't even want to be special. I didn't want to be extraordinary because I was always different, right? I was the kid of a single mom. I was into musical theater instead of sports. I was fat. Like I didn't, I had no desire to stand out. I just wanted to be on the same level as everyone else. And
Hmm.
comedy is one of those rare things that immediately can graduate you from the kids to the adult table.
Right.
So I think it was this perfect storm of like, I'm the man of my house because there's no dad. So I want you to treat me the way I believe I should be treated, which is as an equal. And I don't want you to pander to me or talk down to me because I'm a kid. And I certainly don't want you to be making fun of me behind my back or shaming me for being overweight. So let me take over the energy of the room. And the best way I know how to do that is by being funny. And I watched my mom do it my whole life. So I
Yeah.
just kind of emulated her.
Oh, that's really cool. And it's not lost on me that some of the most beloved comedians had a weight problem. I mean, John Candy, um, uh, Jim Belushi, you know,
Yeah.
and
Chris
unfortunately,
Farley.
they let their weight and their drugs and alcohol, be the end of them, which is really unfortunate because they were just brilliant human beings. Um,
Yeah. And people would always compare me to them growing up, but it wasn't these guys were geniuses. They weren't like you're a genius like them. It was just purely because of girth and like, oh, if you're fat and funny, don't you want to be these guys? Never, to your point, factoring in like, well, these guys were brilliant, but their demise wasn't, the prettiest.
that's right. Yeah. So okay, so that was 8 to 10. You said 10 years old or so that you started to do the on stage stuff. What happened from there? Just give us kind of a little bit of a scope of the how things unfolded for you.
I booked a movie for Paramount when I was 12 years old, which was also with this huge kids network called
Yeah, I
Nickelodeon,
remember Nickelodeon. Yeah, yeah.
and I started making one of the crew people laugh one day. Some guy in his 40s that I was just giving some jokes to, and my mom sort of sidled over after she saw me making him crack up and said, "Do you know who that is? That's the president of Nickelodeon. You should tell him that you want to be on one of his TV shows." And so I did, and cut to 9 months later, he flew my mom and I out to California to be on what was one of the first sketch comedy shows for kids called The Amanda Show. And it was kind of like a young Carol Burnett. And that eventually spun off my show, Drake and Josh, which was probably, it'll easily be one of the things I'm most remembered for, if the only thing. But yeah, that, and by the time I was 14, I had a show with my name in it.
That's pretty cool. You get make any money with that stuff, or how did that work out financially?
No, we didn't, and I didn't want to mention it in the book, the specifics.
Hmm.
And luckily, my buddy Ryan Holiday,
I know
who's a
Ryan.
brilliant
He's a great
author,
guy. Yeah,
you know him,
he's a
right?
good friend of mine. Yeah, phenomenal
He's the
author. Yeah,
best.
he's the best. I love him.
And
We love you,
think
Ryan.
we love you, Ryan, man. And I've known him, thankfully, for the last 15 years. And when I got this book deal, I called him and I said, I don't know literary terms, so I'll put this in showbiz terms. I know I want to write this thing myself. I don't want a ghostwriter, but I need like a producer,
Right.
somebody to read pages and give me notes and make sure I'm not completely shanking this thing. Can you help? And he said, yeah, just for this like small fee, I'll read everything and I'll give you notes. And it was perfect.
Hmm.
And when we got to this part, he said, you have to say how much you made. And I said, why? That's, usually talking about specifics of money is gross. And he said, I know the reality because I know you.
Yeah,
But before I knew you, I assumed, like everyone else, that you should be, set for
that's
life
right.
when a show like this ends. And if you're not, it's because you messed up.
But yeah, that's
And
exactly
yeah,
the assumption that most people will bring to a relationship, like or to an expectation, of a childhood actor, unless the parents stole it, which fits into the messed up category. But
it's so true.
yeah.
So I talk about that over about over 5 years of shooting the show in total. As it breaks down per episode, like at total, we made $900,000
Hmm.
gross, but you clear about half of that after 20% to agent manager and then taxes.
Hmm.
So you make about 450 grand over 5 years, which is about 100 grand a year, which certainly is a nice amount of money to live a very comfortable middle class lifestyle. But anyone who quit their job making 100 grand a year, you would never think like, oh, now you're set for life. You'd say, well, what's your runway until you have to work again?
Hmm.
So at 19, when the show ended, I knew I had about 18 months left of runway before, I would have had to work a 9 to 5 or just find any kind of work.
Hmm.
So I think it was important to me that I at least wanted to sort of correct maybe any sort of misnomer that was out there.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting, and it's news to me as well. That's why I was curious about it, and I had a sense. It's kind of like pro sports. Everyone thinks that if you make it to NFL or NHL or NBA, whatever, that you're suddenly rich. But no. Like the
Right.
new guys, and if you only last a few years, which is pretty normal, you don't make that much money. So
Yeah, it's an interesting world to navigate, and it's not making more, making less. It is what it is.
yeah,
It's more about I think I just that public perception of like, well, if you're not only making blockbuster movies from here on out, like why would you be taking this job for that seems not as prestigious? And it's like, well, sometimes you got to pay your rent.
that's right. Yeah. Not many childhood actors have kind of made a transition to adult actor and also comedian and whatever so you've made a transition. I don't know how graceful it was. We'll get into that, but why is that? Like, why is it that most childhood actors kind of end at that stage and have to move on to something else?
I think there's they're living in the shadow of an anomaly,
Mm.
which I have suffered from in moments, or at least my ego has screamed out saying, you know, but don't you know? And didn't you see? And why isn't, why aren't these huge heights of my career or whatever, why isn't everything predicated upon that instead of sort of resetting itself down to a default level? I think a lot of them are, there's a level of entitlement of
Hmm.
like, well, don't you know who I once was?
Yes.
And thankfully I never suffered from that. I mean, it can be a bit maddening because showbiz is so much like sales. We all on a certain level benefit from you live a good life and you want to benefit from establishing goodwill over years and years. And, we all want a great Yelp review. But inevitably in this business, it's sales. You're only as good as your last sale. So I was incredibly lucky that I love acting. It's this mystery and puzzle that I'm still enamored with, that I know I'll never get a perfect score
Mhm.
on, but somehow I continue to do the work and have interesting results.
Mhm.
And I'm lucky in that way. Steve Martin said that. He's like, if I have any superpower, it's being obsessed.
Mhm.
So for me, I think that's what was my saving grace through all of this, is that I didn't care about the billboards. I didn't care about the red carpets. I cared about doing the
Yeah, yeah.
work.
I think that that's a lesson for everybody to not rest on your laurels, like glory days, like Bruce Springsteen said, I see a
Mm,
lot of my SEAL teammates, like being a SEAL is pretty heady, as you can imagine. Right?
sure.
There's only a couple thousand of us, and we get money thrown at us to do the most incredibly cool things that any guy would want to do. And then when you leave the organization, it's like, yeah, I was a SEAL. You should still fucking love me. And the answer is no. What do you got from me now? Right. It's the
Right.
same thing with professional sports. All sorts of different types of individuals suffer from that. And so the humility is, I thought McConaughey said it pretty well in his book, I was a green light, where he was like, you got to be willing to face the reinvention, by every time you have a success, just clear the table and begin the reinvention process, because
Mm.
that success isn't necessarily going to repeat itself, and it's in the past. And so what's the future, Josh, or what's the future, Mark, look like?
Do you find, Mark, that because people are so enamored with I would say the military, but SEALs and being and that level of being that elite and that well trained, that um, it's hard. It could, for a certain type of person, it could be hard not to lead with that,
It
right?
is.
Because it's like going to Harvard. Like, people are like, wow, like
Hmm.
that's fascinating. Tell me more.
That's true. Everybody wants a piece of you as a SEAL when you get out, and it's easy to get trapped into this sense that you're special without having
Mm,
to prove once again, and prove every day that you're willing to do the work, you're willing to serve and show up, and and the only thing that makes you special is your capacity to serve and to lead, with humility and with honor. It has nothing to do with the trident that was on your chest and that you still have a right to be proud of. You know what I mean? So you're absolutely right. A lot of our teammates get trapped, and actually, honestly, that's one of the things that leads them into um, a little bit of existential angst, because being at the SEAL, it's like being at the pinnacle. It's like being a star, and then all of a
mm.
sudden, the Navy says you're done, and you know, don't let the door hit you in the ass. And then you're looking out at
Yeah.
society for meaning, and some of them write books and shit. I've written my books, but I didn't do it because I was pounding my chest. I did it to teach people, and so that's what really served me. I was like, I'm going to teach people. I'm gonna give them back. The taxpayers paid millions of dollars for training that I had, and I learned a lot of other skills along the way through meditation and breath work as an early pioneer in those skills and visualization. So I want to teach others what I've learned, and that really helped me find meaning again outside the SEALs. You know.
Is there a challenge? I had a friend. I had a friend who was in the Marines and was part of sort of the early invasion into
Hmm.
Afghanistan. And he talked about how he's like, a lot of these people, they didn't know that necessarily, like, they weren't in the Taliban. They just saw us sort of invading their
Hmm.
home. They didn't quite understand the gravity of what was going on. He said, and so when we would sometimes get in battles with these people, he said it was, you know, there. He's like, I could respect this. There was an honor to them,
Hmm.
that they like believed that they were fighting for their home.
Hmm.
And he said, so when I get back to LA or New York and you're being a shithead in the line at Starbucks, he said, it's hard for me not to think back to those people that I looked at who I believed had more honor than you, or
Right.
that, the person who's upset about their latte. And I imagine, that must be such a challenging reacclimation process for a soldier and someone who's seen these kind of things.
It can be, and I think it's also one of the great gifts that veterans bring to our culture. Let's just say America in this case, because we're both, hashtag Americans. In that we've basically gone and we've seen how other people, how let's say the honor of the freedom fighter or the Taliban, even if they were our enemy, a warrior can respect his enemy. In fact, has to respect his enemy. Otherwise, you lose your humanity. And we saw
Right.
that with people who lose their humanity, and that's when you commit war crimes. And so you see your enemy as yourself, as a human being who's fighting for their home, who's fighting for their freedom. At the same time, I've got a job to do. There's a reason that we're here. It's not my job to question, although I can in my, most quiet moments, but I'm honor bound and duty bound to do my job. So in the sense of doing my job, I might have to take this person's life. And it creates these intense moral quandaries. But you deal with it. You have to deal with that. And when you come through the fire of that, assuming you can then overcome the post traumatic stress, which inevitably comes from that, then you have a community of individuals who can be great leaders and great um, exemplars for our society, which has zero moral compass, zero ability to discern honor from, you know, average. And so, we're in a really chaotic time right now. And I think our veterans, and I've been a pretty strong vocal proponent of this. Our veterans are our greatest asset. We're like a national asset. We're not broken. We don't need fixing. We don't need pity. We need to be brought to the front lines, right, to teach and to guide and to lead our culture through this current time, right? Because it's just wandering all over the place. And people are arrogant and people are entitled. And people have learned, that the quick fix is the best path forward when you and I know it's not, right? Hard work, self-awareness, and constant honing the edge of your skills. That's the path forward, right? And that's been lost in our culture.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I remember listening to a podcast with
Yeah.
Jocko and hearing him echo what you just said about, like, the moment he basically said, like, the thing that is 100%, like, you will lose out in buds or in training is if you're not
That's right.
teachable.
Yeah.
And as soon as you think you know everything about your enemy and you lose that respect, he's like, remember, they're always getting smarter. They're always
Mm-hmm.
adapting to make it harder on you. And he's like, as soon as you lose that respect for your enemy, he's like, you are in an incredibly dangerous
100%.
place.
Jocko is awesome. I love him. He's done some great work, and he's right. Now he's like he's got a lot more combat experience than I am. I'm more of a teacher of the developmental side of things. But boy, I totally agree with what he's saying, and that speaks back to this idea of humility, and even to tie it back to you and your profession. It takes great humility to like have a success like your show that you were named after, and then just like, okay, what's the reinvention? What's the next version of myself? And not to think that you got your shit doesn't stink, and to let go of the arrogance, the neediness to be seen as someone special, and just say, okay, how can I show up now and serve? How can I make people laugh? In your case, how can I, what's next? Always be thinking what's next in terms of reinventing oneself. I think it's critical for everyone listening to know that we're in an age of reinvention. We have to be constantly looking forward and saying, what's the future hold for me, because it's moving so freaking fast, right? And it's changing so fast. The VUCA, right, of the world is on us. So we got to be reinventing ourselves. And then we have to make reinvention a natural skill. You know what I mean?
So true. It's funny. I the thing that rubs me wrong as far as being an actor goes, and I always laugh about this, but the words "What have you been up to lately?" are kryptonite for an actor, because if someone has to ask that, it means you don't got much going on.
Right.
But also in this world of streaming and, hundreds of,
That's
sorry,
okay.
it's my wife. Hi, Paige. Um, in this world of streaming and all these different things, it's understandable that unless you're Mark
Mhm.
Wahlberg or a gigantic movie star, you could be certainly working and people just don't
Right.
see it. And so they always want to know, like, what have you been up to? And tell me about this, or like, what's going on here? And it's like in those moments that I just want to be a dentist because no one ever says like anything new with teeth. Like, no, they just assume you are cleaning and doing root canals. And it's like, I don't want to be like, yeah, I did this thing on Hulu and, some people saw it, some didn't, and did this thing on Disney Plus. It was a nice experience. Like, I just want to be like, I don't want to list things to you. Or this is my favorite question. Where do I know you from? It's
I
like,
don't know.
I don't know. Like, but thank you. I'm glad you know me at all.
Yeah, well, that's just our culture and the tax that you pay for being in front of a lot of people, and
Sure.
I'm not famous by any stretch of imagination, but when I have someone who comes up to me in an airport and say, "Hey, you're Mark Divine. I read your book. Thank you very much. It helped me a lot." I'm like, "Wow, that's really cool." You know what I mean? I helped this person. And so, to me, that's the flip for actors. Like, if someone was entertained by you, you just serve them, you help them, you know.
Right.
But gosh, when fame has a serious tax, how did beyond what you've already stated? How did you deal with the tax of fame, where people are projecting, and it's like needing something from you that you just didn't have to give them? Because a lot of people have been ruined by that, especially the seriously famous.
Totally. I think there is it's important to take that pause, pause when agitated, restraint of pen and
Hmm.
tongue, and just, being careful to honor people and being appreciative and grateful that you can have an effect on people. And also, even simple ways like my son's 3.5 now, and I noticed about a year ago that when people would come up or maybe ask for a photo, that he was really starting to
Hmm.
clock it and was kind of starting. And I would put him out of the photo because I didn't want him, I didn't want his photograph everywhere. And eventually he started to kind of like look, and then he started taking his own cue and
Hmm.
walking away. Um, and I just felt like, this is infringing on our
Hmm.
time together. And so I just made the decision that, like, if I'm with my son, and granted, if it's a kid that comes up to me, that's one thing. But if like a grown up comes up to me and wants a picture, I'll say like, "Hey, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much. We can have a nice moment." But I might not take the photo if I'm
Yeah.
with my son. And that was just kind of me making a decision to honor him and honor
Right.
myself in that respect, knowing that. And by the way, 99% of people couldn't be more
Accommodating. Yeah. Right.
understanding and accommodating.
I love that.
So
That's
I
basically
think,
taking your
yeah,
power back and not being codependent to the fan base, and saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm a human being too, and you're not going to get a picture with me today, and be okay with that. Some will, some won't. So what? Right?
it, yeah, and it's funny because I find we have a much nicer moment, like where we're just talking and being like, "Hey, nice to see you," as though we're
Right.
neighbors, as opposed to like, if I'm not with him and you want a photo, I just go like, "All right, come over," and we do it, and then it's very
Right.
transactional. But this way, I'm like looking at them saying, "I'm so sorry. I hope you can understand." And when they give me that energy back, being like, "I'm a parent too. I totally get it." It's like, oh, we shared a moment of understanding as opposed to just
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. That's really
transaction.
cool. So let's kind of shift focus a little bit. How did you? What was the catalyst for you to kind of deal with your weight and your health issues? And it sounds like you got involved in some unhealthy habits. Tell us about that journey into darkness, and how you got healthy, because you're extremely healthy today.
Yeah, I think, overall, my sort of foray into food and then eventually drugs and alcohol was just that I
Hmm.
overdid things. And I, you can have two. kids from the exact same family with the same rearing, the same trauma or lack thereof. And one might have that addictive
That's right.
component and the other
Mhm.
doesn't. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think they've isolated
Mhm.
that gene yet, but I do think there's a bit of just you were either
Yeah.
born with it or you're not. And I certainly was. And so my first foray into that was with, eating, as most kids are introduced into like overeating birthday cake or snacks from the closet. And then inevitably it turned into me being 300 pounds at
Wow.
17 years old. I wind up losing 120 pounds, but I was the same head and now a different body. And so I needed a new medicine. And then I found drugs and alcohol, and they had so much more efficacy, but with such bigger
Right.
consequence and side effect. Um, and then after 4 years of kind of basically, setting my life on fire, I realized that it was gonna be me or the drug, me or the bite of food, me or the rushing full force towards prestige and success. Like nothing could
Mhm.
fill me up. And that's when at 21 I got into recovery and have been sober ever since.
Okay, so was it your own kind of consciousness that said that had the conversation, or was it your big brother that hauled your ass into a recovery center? Like, how did is
It
someone listening
was
is going, "Josh, how'd you do it? Because I'm in that place right now." What would you tell them?
Well, I would say that, I never learned anything on a good day, that pain is a
Mhm.
great motivator, and that if you're feeling hopeless and sick and tired of being
Mhm.
sick and tired, there's a great line
Mhm.
in recovery that says, your best thinking got you a front row seat in AA.
Good job, right?
So maybe, yeah, maybe you should listen, and stop
Right.
thinking so much. So I would say that if you're in a completely lost and hopeless place, it's painful, and I'm sorry you're there, but also it's a great place
Yeah.
to start. And I had to. I've never been able to think my way into right action. I've always had to act my
I
way into
love
right
that. Mm.
thinking. I've had to physically disrupt my cycle, and with that, that was seeking help for the first time and getting to that place. But I was also I had been beaten into a state of willingness, which is also why, I think I think if someone's not in that place, it's really hard for them to change, and you kind of have to just sort of lovingly detach until that person is ready. And it's usually
Right.
through catastrophe. It's usually that they have to hit a bottom to really be
Yeah,
ready,
no, I
in my
agree with that, and I
experience.
think that was one of the wisest things I've heard in a long time. Think I haven't been able to think my way to right action. I've had to act my way to right thinking. That reminds me of one of the sayings I use in the SEALs, or even now, was that doubt is eliminated through action, right? And so if you're
Mm,
unclear about where to move, just move, because that'll create the
right.
loop for learning, right? And so this is all about learning about ourselves. If things aren't working, move towards something healthy, whether that's AA or finding a mentor or asking for help, and then go from there. You don't have to solve. Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't have to solve the whole puzzle today. You know.
Yeah, I love it's the thing that kills me about like I have a buddy who's my age, maybe he's older, he's like 40, but like young guy, like reasonably young, and he just was he was like jokingly comparing himself to like a old crotchety, sort of those like old,
Mm, yeah,
Archie Bunker
cranky.
types, like non yeah, cranky, non-PC, and he's like, I'm not changing, like this is me now. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I hope not. Like, I don't ever want to be that guy who, and I see us all, that's why I try not to be too critical of like
Hmm.
Gen Z or or do that thing of, that music's no good or whatever. I just try to say like, well, maybe I'm just not the audience, or I don't, I'm not equipped to understand that,
Hmm.
but I'd like to. And because I don't want to get too
Yeah,
set in
that's
my
awesome.
ways.
So the book. Let's talk about the book. Happy people are annoying. Great title, by the way. Are they really annoying, or is that just a catchy title for you?
It's probably a catchy title. I mean, I think I just assumed happy people, as I said before, were like sort of had,
Fake? You mean like fake happy people?
I don't even know what version of, I just assumed most people, it'd be like, here we are, Mark, you and I are talking, and it seems already that we have this. I mean, maybe you're just a great podcast host, but it seems like we have a really nice shorthand
Agree.
and,
Yeah.
a language of the heart. And
Mhm.
we couldn't come from more different, probably, backgrounds and
Right.
circumstance. And it would be easy throughout most of my life to be like, oh, there's a guy in shape, military, elite, like he doesn't get me, he doesn't understand. And that's how I looked at the world, right? That
Mhm.
attractive people or successful people, or just, they didn't really understand what was going on in life. And I'm here in the muck and the doom and gloom, and this is really what it's all about, trudging
Mhm.
through life. And
Mhm.
it was only through walking through experience and facing it, and being willing to live life on life's terms, that I was able to sort of redefine what happiness was for me.
Yeah. I think that's why your book is so valuable is because you're not presenting this image of perfection or, I'm this super successful person. You've walked through the fire, right? And you've stared down, what I call stare down the wolf of fear.
Right.
And you've come out, and now you found what a true sense of happiness, which is not like happy glad wrapper. It's contentment, right? And peace of mind. And that's rare. So people, they mistake humor, they mistake pleasure for happiness.
Mm.
And happiness is, those are moments, right? Those are moments of maybe joy, but that's not to be confused with happiness. Happiness is the contentment you feel, when you know you're doing a good job or the best job you can as a father, right? Or a husband or a mother or a wife, you know what I mean? And that
Mm.
you're just showing up every day doing the best you can and you think, okay, everything's okay, right? That's happiness.
Yeah, it's incredibly fleeting. It's
Yeah.
very, it's like the weather, and it sort of comes in and out. And you're right. And I've realized that sort of the universe demands balance. My buddy
That's
used
right.
to always say, too much sunshine brings about a desert. Like, and so as
Mhm.
quickly as those nice feelings are coming, challenging ones are coming, and they will be intertwined in this ballet of ups and downs, until the sun eats the earth. So it's good
Mhm.
to not attach yourself to either side.
I love that, and that's profound. And to take that analogy a step further, the sun is always shining on the other side of the clouds, right? And so to start identifying with the sun that's always shining, regardless of the clouds and the storms of your life, and
Totally.
that requires non-attachment, to the drama.
Love it. Love that.
So, what's is acting like forever in your future? Like, what's kind of in the future for Josh?
Gosh, I don't know. I've had like this great 2 years of work in traditional, TV and movies, um, and but most importantly, like, I have acting class on Thursday, and I'll sit, and right now it's over Zoom, but normally it would have been sitting in a black box theater with, you know, 14 other working actors, mostly people who are maybe have yet to book a lot of credits, and some people who have been working for 20, 30 years, and we'll put up a scene and be critiqued by our teacher, and work on it, and bring it back the next week, hopefully better and with some new insight. Like,
Mm,
again, I have this thing that, through so many times of like getting a bad review, or not getting that thing that I thought was in the bag, or someone telling me, the business has really changed, and
mhm,
XYZ, here are all the reasons why it's going to be harder. Like, somehow the audition comes, I print it out, and I start breaking down the script. Like, to your point, I just move.
yeah.
I just put one foot in front of the other. So I don't know. if I woke up one morning and I was like, yeah, I did it. I'm done with that side of things. I don't think that would be bad either. I'd be
Mhm.
fascinated to see what was next. But for the
I
last
love that.
20 years, it's been this stupid thing I can't let go of.
I love that. There's a couple things you said which I think are awesome and crucial. One is you're still a student, right? You're not showing up on Thursday nights to teach or to be the guy who's been there and done that. Like you have that what we call the beginner's mind, and I try really
Mm,
hard to keep that as well. It's like I'm always a student. If you think you know, that's when ignorance sets in. The more knowledge you
right.
have, the more ignorance you have. You should
Right.
always be emptying your cup. That's profound. Good job with that, and that's something to model for others. And then
I,
this idea of just being surprised by what shows up. I love that, right? Because all we have is today. Ultimately, all we have is this moment. And so to develop that surprise by, hey, what's going to show up? And that then allows for spontaneous creativity, spontaneous invention, newness, right? And you're not always working off of memory.
yeah, I think that's so true. And I don't, I don't want to be a fat guy with a black belt. You
Yeah.
know, living,
I know a lot of those dudes. Oh
yeah,
my God.
man. And I go like, I believe you did
Excuse
what
me.
it took then, but I don't know. Or I know plenty of guys, that's I always say like if you need relationship advice, ask someone who's in a relationship you look up to.
Right.
Um and don't ask your single friends. Um, I know plenty of guys who smoke 2 packs a day, are twice divorced, and are always right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't want to be that.
Yeah. That's awesome. So
So can I tell you my Navy SEAL story
you could
so
tell, yeah,
that
I want to hear that, and I don't want this to end because I'm having so much fun talking to you. So yeah, let's talk. Tell me your Navy SEAL story.
so I do this movie Red Dawn, which is a remake of the
I
80s
remember the
movie.
'80s version. I never saw the remake. Now I got to go watch it. Now that I know you're in it, awesome.
So it's Chris Hemsworth and it's me and it's this
Wasn't it
big
Patrick
badass.
Swayze in the original one, or who was in the original one?
Yeah, Swayze and
Yeah,
Charlie Sheen
right.
and
Oh my God, that was classic.
and and so I go to do it and they're like, "We'd like you to get in shape before you start, doing the movie." And I was like, "Always room for improvement. Sounds great. Not sure what you're gonna do because I do about 30 minutes on the elliptical a day, so I'm in pretty good shape here." So they go, "Well, let's just try." So I go to this warehouse in Inglewood and I meet these two guys, Dave and Logan,
Okay.
and this was 2008 or 2009, and both Navy SEALs. And I'm sure, Mark, you've had experience with this, like in show business especially. You'll meet a guy again who's like, in his 50s, kind of let himself go,
Hmm.
and he'll be the advisor or the trainer, and he'll reference having some elite military
Oh,
training.
they're all over the place. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw a meme. This is kind of an aside. I saw a meme the other day. There were 200 Navy SEALs in Vietnam, and I met 1,000 of them.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so these guys were legit. It sounds like.
These guys were like I was like, oh, when were you like, basically like, when were you discharged from the military? They're like 6 months ago. I'm like, oh my god. I was like, okay,
Right.
wow.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating about these guys, which I love so much about the SEALs, was Logan was a sniper. And
Hmm.
so he was 6'6", like it looked like, carved out of marble.
Hmm.
And then there was Dave, who was probably 5'7", solid, stocky,
Hmm.
but like looked like he had crawled through some vents.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Like,
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. SEALs come in all shapes and sizes, and some surprising ones as well.
like totally capable bodies, but like no pretty muscles. Just looked like guys who could get it done.
Yeah.
And they proceeded to kick my ass for the next 2 months. But we were just like we literally had the greatest time because, and I think what we've talked about on the pod is, I feel lucky that because I don't have any of that like high school memories of the time I caught the touchdown pass, or I have no like delusions of what I once was.
Hmm.
I like really I bared myself to them saying like, listen, I know what I'm lacking.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I am, but I know I can work hard. That's all I know. Physically, I'm never going to be at the level that, most of these guys, I'm comparing myself against other actors
Hmm.
like a Hemsworth or a Chris Evans. Like I'm just not that. They're gifted in ways I'm not, but I'll show up 6 days a week. I'll hobble in here. And I think they respected that. And so we had the best time. And I think they respected that I'd lost all that weight. So they were like,
Yeah.
oh, you certainly can do it if you put your mind to it. And I just remember it was 5 days of a brutal workout. And then it was Saturday. And they said, well, it's Saturday. Let's switch it up a little bit. And Dave comes over and he throws this huge harness on me and it's connected to a Mack truck tire. And he goes,
Start running.
we're going to drag this for a mile. And he must have seen the color drain out of my face. And he smiles and goes, don't worry, I'm going to do it too.
Nice.
And we just like walked and bullshitted and dragged this tire over, like asphalt for, it probably took me 2 hours, but it was great.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I honor you for that. 2 months is no joke. I trained my company SealFit, and I trained the actors for the TV show Six, which is all about SEAL Team Six,
Right.
and all but one of them quit about 6 times, and it was only 5 days of
Awesome.
training. But I mean, we brought it hard. And the guy who didn't quit, I wish I could remember his name. He was the guy who played on Narcos, the Hispanic dude, hardcore.
Oh
You
yeah.
might remember it. But anyways, and so, but they all had like in the pictures, they all looked like freaking muscled up guys, and I'm like, what? Like, what do you do to train? Are those like implants? Because
Right.
none of you are fit. At least the way I define functional, or Navy SEAL would define fit. It's fascinating. So did that training build some confidence? Because normally, Navy SEAL training isn't just about the physical; it's about developing mental toughness and resiliency.
Absolutely. I mean, now that was I had lost a bunch of weight, but again, to your point, like I was sort of working out here and there. It wasn't a lifestyle. From then, I don't think I've gone, unless I've been injured, more than 2 weeks without working out. But I almost always am working out 5 to 6 days a week, just moving my
Yeah.
body in some way. And I've really embraced the suck
Yep.
workouts, and
Good for you.
that's what I'm most proud of. Like I'm really good at push-ups, pull-ups, air squats, like some powerlifting moves. Like I don't do anything. All the things that people hate most in the gym that they try to avoid, like just legs in
Hmm.
general. Most men just don't train legs,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
all that stuff. Heavy
Great.
kettlebells, just that I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we got to wrap up here, but that brings me to kind of like, I mean, you're already getting into your kind of like, what does a day in Josh Peck's life look like? So, what does that look like? What's your morning routine? You just described your kind of functional fitness workout. What else? What else do you do that keeps you healthy and sane and motivated?
It's probably, I wake up around 6 a.m. with my son, and I'll make him breakfast, get him ready for school, and take him to school, and be back home by like 8 or 8:30. And then it's about doing something functional, a hike, a workout, a boxing, yoga.
Nice.
And then it's just about doing some kind of work, be it social media, creating a funny video, doing some writing. If I don't have like a specific show up to set at this time type job, it's like, well, what can I do within my own power? And so I'll do that. And yeah, and then it's just about, and then hopefully some version of taking care of myself, be it doing like sauna and cold
Nice.
plunge, doing a massage, something. I need to get better with that.
Hmm.
But if I can, or maybe it's going to a meeting, or just seeing a buddy.
Hmm.
It's just like something that I can do that I know will just trying to be nice to myself too, and not making it singularly about work because that can be a trap
Yeah.
too.
And obviously, you have a strong relationship. What practices do you do with your wife to deepen the relationship and keep it on track?
I think it's still being revealed. We've been coming up in a week. We'll be married like 5 years, and I'm still learning.
Mhm.
I still need to get better. I still want her to read my mind, and get upset when she doesn't, and doing better with communication and all that. So I think. Recently we announced, we're having a second kid,
Congratulations.
which will come in
Wow,
October.
that's exciting.
Thanks. So
Wow.
it's great. We're just like navigating, it's like also realizing like, okay, we have a 3.5-year-old, which is beautiful, but can, stress us, and that there's going to be a new kid in the mix. So it's honoring this idea of like, there's no perfect
Mhm.
days. It's just about, trying to get a little bit better every day, and lack of reaction is almost always the key. I have
Yeah.
found.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's the practice in and of itself. Awesome, Josh. What an honor it's been. So much fun to talk to you. Gosh, if there's anything we can do or I can do to support you, don't hesitate to reach out, and and I'm here to serve you any way I can.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. I'm so glad we got to chat. Thank you for
Yeah,
having
no,
me.
it's been an honor, and I know everyone's going to love this conversation. And folks can reach you like where? Where do you like people to kind of like learn about your work, follow your stuff?
Sure, yeah. You can. I have my own podcast called Male Models. So, Mark, you're welcome
I'd love to
anytime
do it.
because you fit right in with the title, Male Models.
I'd
And
love to do it. Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and then Instagram, Shua Peck, and Happy People Are Annoying wherever books are
Happy
sold.
people are annoying. Josh, thanks very much, buddy. It's great talking to you and hooyah from the SEAL
Thanks, Mark.
teams. Yeah.